For this webinar, I would like you to be able to identify 2 characteristics of emergent readers and writers, kids who are just getting started with literacy. And I'd like to be able to identify 2 characteristics of early conventional readers and writers, kids who are learning how to formally read and write. I'd also like you to be able to identify the 4 areas of literacy development. Okay, so just a little bit about our guys. This is no news to probably any of you, but students with disabilities, they might be nonverbal, they might have intellectual disabilities, they might have gross or fine motor impairments, they might have vision problems, hearing impairments, they might have both a vision and a hearing impairment and might be deaf-blind. All of these impairments, we don't know to what degree they might even be because they're hard. These students are hard to test. They may not have a clear yes and no. So engaging these guys in literacy activities can be really tough. The other piece about the students is we know from the research they have fewer and qualitatively different literacy experiences compared to kids without disabilities. So that's going to mean that our kids have some real fragmented understandings about what literacy is. So literacy development for students without disabilities goes on this trajectory from like emergent literacy to conventional literacy. And basically that starts at birth and progresses along till kids hit like formal schooling, like perhaps kindergarten or elementary school. We need to understand this trajectory so we can figure out where our students are on this trajectory so that way we can choose the most appropriate instruction for them. So let's look at this trajectory a little more closely. So literacy begins at birth with emergent literacy. And emergent literacy, very simply, are all the reading and writing behaviors that precede and develop into conventional literacy. I love to put a name on this and a face on this. This is emergent literacy. You guys are all experts in emergent literacy. This is all the literacy learning that kids do from birth, right? They're learning, people are reading to them, they're learning how to scribble, they're exploring books by themselves, they're eating books and ripping books and throwing books. This is just the very, very beginnings. I read a study somewhere that said that kids have over 1,000 hours of these kinds of experiences before they get to kindergarten. And the other thing to know about this is that there's no readiness involved here. None of these kids have to be ready, right? People are doing these things with them naturally. Moms are reading books to their infants before their infants even know what they are. We're giving kids crayons when they're a toddler, and we're letting them go to town and eat the crayons and throw them and rip the paper. So there's no readiness there at all. Kids don't need to be ready to engage in literacy. So here's just a list of the things that emergent readers and writers are doing. And there's the citation for that research study I just mentioned. They're doing things like, building knowledge of words. People are reading books with them all the time, and they're learning the words in the books. They're learning important concepts of things about the world from books. They're developing a sense of print awareness, that print means something. It's what we read. We read it, not the picture. They're figuring out how you use a book. They're eating books. They're fanning them. They're flipping them. They're ripping them. They're throwing them. They're sitting on them. They're drooling on them. But that's one way that they learn how to use books. They're playing sound games, which helps them develop that sound awareness that's going to be critical later for phonics instruction. They're learning about letter names and sounds, again, which is going to be critical for later word instruction. They're doing lots and lots and lots of scribbling. So I think you can see this is all exploratory stuff. Kids are experimenting here, and these things are the really basic fundamental pieces that allow them to become conventional readers and writers, which is this, right? And again, I love to put a picture on this. These are kids who are now reading words. These are kids who are now writing. It's not scribble anymore. They've gotten to this place because they had all these rich emergent literacy experiences first. And here's just a list of the things that early conventional readers and writers are doing. They're still building their knowledge of vocabulary and knowledge of the world. They're learning how to formally read words with phonics instruction. They know enough about words now where they're reading books independently, right? They're not fanning them and flipping anymore. They're going through them and reading them and enjoying them and knowing what they mean. They're learning how to read fluently. They know enough words so they can read them quickly enough so that they can understand the actual sentences. They're learning comprehension strategies. how to make an inference, how to write a summary. And they're learning how to get their thoughts out on paper. It's not scribble anymore. So I think you can see the difference here between emergent readers and writers and early conventional readers and writers. The important thing here to point out is that these students, all of them, the children that you saw in the emergent literacy slides and the children you just saw in the early conventional slides, they are engaged in all of these areas at once. They're reading, they're writing, they're communicating about what they're reading and writing about, they're listening, they're having these skills, they're building these skills all at the same time. It used to be believed that literacy learning starts with just listening. It used to be believed that literacy learning occurred in the kind of this hierarchical step block fashion. First you learn how to listen, then you learn how to talk, then you learn how to read, and then you learn how to write. Well, just forget that right now. That's no longer the view. We know from the research that this is the view. Kids are learning how to do these things all at the same time. And growth in one area affects growth in the other area. They're all interrelated. So, what about our students with significant disabilities? So I go back and look at these and I think about, what are our kids doing at this point in their life? Right? Were they getting crayons to scribble with? I don't think so. If they're spastic and have trouble using their hands, the ability, they probably didn't have the ability to write or scribble. They can't use their hands, so they probably didn't have the ability to hold a book and explore it. So this period of life for our kids was probably really limited in terms of literacy experiences. I don't think they had 1,000 hours of literacy experiences here. But the point of me showing you these things is that our kids most likely have a really fragmented understanding of the basics of literacy. And so it stands to reason that that lack of emergent literacy, the incomplete development of the emergent literacy skills, it's going to make it really hard for them to become early conventional readers and writers. And that's not true for all of our kids, but for many of them. So just to summarize that, many of our students have difficulty with emergent literacy experiences because they've never had them. And it's important for us to fill them up with lots of rich emergent literacy experiences so they can become early conventional readers and writers. And so the research says this is a good idea. This is how we should do it. The research out there and the references out here say that what we know about literacy instruction for our guys is useful. What we know about literacy instruction for kids without disabilities is beneficial for our guys. So we need to be doing the same things for our guys that we do with kids without disabilities. Here's just a little research that I'm going to share with you because it's driving what we're doing in the schools. So these are just some points from the National Early Literacy Panel report that came out in 2005, and they were interested in literacy instruction for kids from birth to 6. They were trying to figure out what do kids need to be doing at that age of their life. And so what they did is they looked to see, what are the predictors that kids need to be working on that are predictors of later conventional literacy learning. And so they found that the important things for kids to learn are language, the alphabetic code, and print knowledge. So they found that those are the 3 things that early literacy experiences should be focusing on. So this National Early Literacy Panel report is all about emergent literacy. The report also identified effective interventions for how to support each of those predictors. So again, this report was saying the same things that I've just been saying, that emergent literacy provides a critical foundation. Here are the specific components that you need to be focusing on. And they, like I said, they also listed specific interventions. The other report that came out is the National Reading Panel report, and this targeted literacy instruction for kids kindergarten through 3rd grade, and this is clearly early conventional literacy instruction. And it looked at hundreds of studies about literacy instruction in the areas of phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocab, and text comprehension. And they identified research-based interventions to teach each of those areas. Now, it's important to point out that the panel chose those 5 areas for literacy instruction, and that many believe that it's not complete because writing is not on there, and writing is a really important part of literacy instruction. So I'm sharing these resources with you, again, because these are the things that are driving what we're doing in the schools. And so in case you're interested, here are the links for getting to these reports. You can download them and look at them. So I've alluded to this. I said this, I talked about this in the beginning of the webinar. It's important, and when it comes to our guys, it's important to figure out where they are on this emergent to conventional literacy trajectory. It's important to do this, and don't let age get in the way. When we think about emergent literacy, we think about stuff we do for little kids. And so, as we saw in those pictures, the types of experiences that little kids get, our kids don't necessarily get. So it might be that our students are emergent readers and writers, even kids who are in middle school and high school. And so the point I want to make about that is we do have a lot of middle schoolers and high schoolers who are emergent readers and writers. However, because of their age, they are given literacy instruction that they use for older kids, like early conventional instruction. And so in those situations, there might be a real mismatch. So our kids who are emergent readers and writers need to be getting emergent literacy activities if they're going to progress along. And so emergent literacy can be done with our kids, especially ones who are older. We're not going to give them brown bear, right? We're going to give them age-appropriate materials and accessible ways for them to write. So it is possible to do it for older kids, absolutely. And it could be that, you know, we have kids who are early conventional readers and writers, and they can read words, but when you ask them to write, they don't know what to do. And so we might see this uneven profile here. And it's just important to recognize those things so we know where to fill in the holes. We looked at this before, but I want to emphasize this again for our students. In literacy instruction, for our students, we have to be including all of these things at once. We have to be giving them, we need to be giving them opportunities to read books with us and on their own. At the same time, we need to be having a way for them to write with some kind of alternative pencil. At the same time, we need to give them a way to communicate about books and writing. So they have to have some kind of communication device or some system. And then, you know, we have to be building their receptive knowledge of the world at the same time. So all of these areas need to be happening concurrently. And here's just a slide just to show you that it is possible. Both of these students have deaf-blindness. Matthew on the left and then Jake on the right. They both have some kind of hearing problem and some kind of vision problem, and they're both nonverbal. And when we started working with them, they were emergent readers and writers. They're older. And after 2 or 3 years of really rich emergent literacy experiences, these guys are becoming early conventional readers and writers, and they're actually starting to read words at the first grade level. So it shows us they're able to move along this trajectory. We were able to identify where they were and give them the right activities to help move them along. And so if you want to see more about these guys, you can go to the website from the Center for Literacy and Disability Studies and learn more about them. There are case studies of both of them up there, which have videos, narrative, and stories and work samples on them. Here are just some resources for getting started. These are fabulous resources about literacy for our students. Check them out. And I think I'd like to make this last point one more time. Our students don't need to be ready to read and write. They don't need to be ready for Braille. They don't need to be ready for any of that stuff. As you can see, literacy learning starts at birth. So our students don't need to be ready, but actually the ones that need to be ready is us, because we need to have the appropriate books and the appropriate ways for kids to write. So that's the end of this webinar. I hope you've learned a little bit about an overview of literacy. Next, I'd like you to go to the next slide and take a post test about what you've learned in this webinar. Thank you.